Good evening and welcome back to the Making of Gurugram. In episode 2, we saw how leverage and private expansion between 2000 and 2010 created Gurugram's skyline, but also embedded risk. Tonight, in episode 3, we will examine 2010 to 2020, a decade that didn't just correct real estate excesses, but redefined how cities grow, how people consume, and how developers must operate. R.K. Singh ji, this decade feels different from any before it. Lalit ji, this decade was not just about regulation like RERA or insolvency through NCLT. It was a multi-layer reset. Regulatory, financial, urban density, consumer behavior, technology-driven. Gurugram didn't just slow down, it restructured itself. This was the decade when real estate giants like Supertech fell publicly, courts intervened decisively, promoters of Unitech faced personal accountability, and a new philosophy of development emerged. R.K. Singh ji, this decade changed the psychology of Indian real estate, didn't it? Very much so, Lalit ji. Before 2010, the assumption was projects may delay, but promoters are insulated. After 2010, that assumption collapsed. This decade introduced personal, legal, and reputational consequence into real estate. Before we talk about new players have adapted quickly to these regulations. One image that defined this shift was the demolition of the Supertech Twin Towers in August 2020 in Noida. Yes, the demolition of the Twin Towers developed by Supertech was not just a demolition engineering event, it was a legal and moral signal. For the first time, an occupied, marketed real estate structure built by Supertech was demolished. This sent a clear message. Illegality in planning, approvals, or execution will not be regularized by scale or influence. For developers across NCR, including Gurugram, this was a psychological shock. So this wasn't about one project? No. It was about ending the culture of post-facto forgiveness. The second shock was Unitech. Absolutely, the arrest and prolonged legal proceedings involving promoters and directors of Unitech marked a watershed moment, as for decades, defaults before were just treated as civil disputes, civil delays. Post-2010, they began to be treated as fiduciary failures, governance lapses, criminal negligence in extreme cases. This fundamentally changed how promoters viewed risk. So how did these events reshape developer behavior? It rewired the industry's DNA. Developers realized personal liberty is not insulated, brand damage is irreversible, legal exposure is real. The industry moved from launch fast, regularize later to comply first, launch later. And this explains why legacy developers like Unitech, Vipul, Vatika, Bestech, JMD faded or collapsed? Yes. These firms were built on courts and insolvency frameworks is tightened. They lacked capital buffers, execution flexibility, governance systems. They couldn't transform fast enough. And in contrast, a new generation rose. Correct. Developers like M3M, Elan, Central Park, Krisumi, Emaar, Godrej Properties, Soba, Signature Global, and AIPL emerged or recalibrated with a new philosophy. Let's talk about planning and density, because this decade also changed how land is used. Correct. This is often overlooked. The government realized that land is finite, cities can't expand endlessly, so policies began encouraging density creation within existing urban limits. A very critical question here, was the rapid density creation without proportionate planning and development of adequate infrastructure really the right move? No, it's not at all for cities with growing population like Gurugram. Since density became a revenue and supply solution, infrastructure always remained a lagging public responsibility. So essentially, density was the right direction, but taken at the wrong speed. Exactly, urban form changed faster than urban systems could absorb. It's the failure on the part of the city planners. So, referring to the Deen Dayal Jan Awas Yojana in 2016 and the fourth floor with still parking policy in 2019, were these policies introduced before the right time? The DDJAY launched in 2016 and the fourth floor with still parking policy in 2019, though were right in intent and direction, but were introduced before revamping the adequate infrastructure made fully ready. And what about additional floors in existing sectors? That was another silent but powerful change. Additional floors in plotted sectors increased housing supply with car parking in the stilt, which unlocked values for buyers. Now let's come to the new players. Who shaped this decade? This is where the ecosystem truly changed. Developers like M3M, Elan, Central Park, Krisumi, Godrej, Soba, Signature, AIPL and Emaar entered or recalibrated their strategies. Each brought something distinct and luxury. DLF launched high-end camellias in 2014 with Signature in affordable mass housing. Let's talk specifically about Emaar India, especially after its separation through demerger from MGF in mid-2018. What was unique that Emaar added to the Gurugram real estate space? After its demerger from MGF, Emaar introduced a global master plan development philosophy to Gurugram. It shifted focus from standalone, launch-driven projects to integrated communities. This decade also saw technology disrupt consumption itself. Absolutely. The rise of e-commerce startups, app-based delivery, digital payments created a crisis in unorganized retail. Traditional retail formats lost footfall. There's also talk of product mismatch. Yes, in this decade, consumers became informed, aspirations changed, oversized luxury inventory met limited genuine demand. Affordable and mid-income housing saw real traction. Developers who read this shift survived. If you had to summarize this decade, Gurugram moved from speculative growth to structured density. So this wasn't just a correction, it was a transformation of how cities, consumers, and developers interact. Thank you, RK Singh ji, for helping us unpack this deeply layered decade. So this episode is not just about regulation, it's about accountability entering real estate. And thank you to our audience for staying with us through a difficult but necessary chapter. Thank you and welcome. In episode 4, we look ahead between Clyde and Wedgie and disciplined capital. This was the Making of Gurugram. Land, Law and Power, episode 3. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Good night.